The hospital was quiet, and the clock showed nearly midnight. Dr. Amir sighed, rubbing his tired eyes, wishing he could go home. One last patient remained, a frail, elderly woman with trembling hands. He didn't know her story, but something in her eyes pulled him in. What happened next would stay with him forever. Dr. Amir had always been devoted to his patients, but the hospital shifts had grown longer and more exhausting over the years. His days blurred together, consultations, emergencies, paperwork, and by the time he reached the end of his shift, he often felt as though he had nothing left to give. That evening, as he glanced at the clock, he felt the weight of another 12-hour day pressing down on him. He had promised himself he wouldn't take work home, that he would rest, that he would finally breathe. But when the nurse informed him there was still one patient waiting, he sighed and tightened his grip on his stethoscope. He didn't know what to expect. A routine check, perhaps, or someone who needed urgent attention. As he entered the small hospital room, he saw her, a frail woman with wisps of gray hair, clutching a worn shawl around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on him, wide and anxious, yet carrying a deep sorrow that struck him to his core. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Amir leaned closer, his heart softening as he listened carefully to her first words. "My son, he left me alone," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I've been waiting for him to call, but he never does." She blinked away tears, and for a moment the sterile hospital room felt unbearably cold. Dr. Amir felt an ache in his chest. He realized she wasn't just here for medical care, she needed someone to see her, to acknowledge her loneliness. He adjusted her pillows, made her comfortable, and spoke gently, asking about her health and her family. As she shared stories of her life, her joys, her losses, the moments she regretted, the moments she cherished, Dr. Amir listened quietly. The world outside the room seemed to vanish. For the first time that day, he felt a connection that went beyond charts and medications. He saw her not as a patient, but as a human being, fragile yet resilient. The exhaustion in his body didn't vanish, but a warmth filled his chest, a quiet understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures mattered most. And though the hospital corridors were empty, and the night stretched long and lonely outside the room, inside a fragile bond was forming. A bond that neither of them could have predicted, but one that was about to change both their lives forever. As Dr. Amir continued to care for her, he noticed the heavy weight she carried, not just the frailty of age, but the loneliness that had built over decades. Her son had not visited for years, her relatives were scattered across cities, and she lived mostly in silence. He realized that no prescription could heal this kind of pain. "Why did he leave me?" she asked one evening, her voice breaking. "Was I not enough?" Dr. Amir's heart clenched. He wanted to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that sometimes people fail out of fear or selfishness, but he could only hold her hand and nod, hoping his presence alone offered some comfort. Her story was heartbreaking. She had endured illness, poverty, and loss, all while carrying herself with dignity. Yet, in the eyes of the world, she had been invisible. Nurses rushed past her room, busy with emergencies. Visitors rarely came, and even the hospital administration treated her as just another patient, another case. Dr. Amir felt helpless. The weight of the world seemed to press down on him, and he wondered if staying late was enough. Could his small acts of care really make a difference? The loneliness she endured, the neglect from those who should have cared. He felt it all, mirrored in his own struggles to find meaning beyond the endless routines of his work. The night grew colder, the fluorescent lights flickering. The woman shivered, and Dr. Amir wrapped a blanket around her. Her eyes, filled with tears, locked onto his. "I'm afraid no one will remember me when I'm gone," she whispered. It was a moment that pierced him to the core. He left the room briefly, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. In the quiet of the empty corridor, he realized he had never faced someone so truly vulnerable. And he knew that the world outside often failed people like her, people who deserved kindness but received indifference instead. For hours, he wrestled with doubt. Could one doctor's compassion really counteract years of neglect? Could his small gestures matter in a life that had known so much pain? The answers were unclear, and yet deep down he knew he had to try. The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, as Dr. Amir sat beside her bed, the woman reached for his hand and said, "Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening." Her voice, weak but sincere, carried a gratitude that resonated deeply within him. She shared a memory from her youth, a story of helping a stranger in need, a story she had almost forgotten. She said that small acts of kindness, even when unnoticed, had the power to change lives. Dr. Amir realized in that moment that he was not just helping her. She was teaching him something profound. The woman's condition slowly improved, and though she would eventually leave the hospital, the bond they had formed stayed with both of them. Dr. Amir saw her smile one last time, radiant despite the lines of hardship etched on her face. "Promise me," she whispered, "that you will always remember the power of kindness." Her words echoed in his mind long after she had left. He returned to his rounds with renewed purpose, seeing each patient not as another case to manage, but as a human being with a story, a struggle, and a need for empathy. News came later that her son, touched by the care she had received, reached out to her and vowed to visit more often. The woman's story, which had begun in loneliness and despair, had sparked change not just in Dr. Amir's life, but in the life of her family. For Dr. Amir, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, staying a little longer, listening a little harder, and showing a bit more patience could transform lives in ways unimaginable. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about the quiet power of kindness, the kind that lingers long after the hospital lights have dimmed. That night, he left the hospital with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He had entered the room exhausted and uncertain, but he left inspired, reminded that even the smallest acts could ripple through lives, leaving hope, warmth, and joy in their wake. Kindness is never wasted. Even in moments of exhaustion and doubt, a listening ear, a warm hand, a patient heart, these can change the course of a life. Sometimes, the smallest gestures leave the biggest impact. We may never know the full effect of our compassion, but it always matters. Stay kind, stay present, and let your heart guide the way.